Hey everyone, I'm THPine and welcome back to my Screeps Nooby guide. Today we're going to talk about refactoring your code. So what is refactoring exactly? It is when you rearrange your code with the goal of making it more readable, easier to change, easier to extend, less background and just more clean and nicer looking overall. Screeps is a game about evolving and changing your code all the time. Like, that's what you do in this game. You write code, you change it, you adapt it, you evolve it, you change it all the time. And the nicer and more well organized your code is, the easier this will be. So it's very important to have a good code base, which is clean, which is nice, which is well organized, good with a good structure. So it will be easier for you to change it and evolve it and become good at the game. So over the course of this series, I produced a bunch of code, which is, to be honest, not what I would consider nice or clean code whatsoever. It's a pretty big mess in a lot of places. Yes, I put a lot of effort into commenting, but besides that, the code is just not nice. It's not very well organized, it's not well structured, and there's a lot of redundancy and stuff like that. And so I decided to sit down and refactor it and change it around and make it a little bit nicer. It's still not perfect, but it's quite a bit better than it was before. And in this episode, I will show you my new code base and explain how it is organized and how it's structured. And the goal is, again, as with most videos in this series, not to tell you, do it exactly this. It's more about giving people who are not as experienced in this topic, like how do you structure code, how do you organize this kind of stuff, giving these people an idea on how you can do it and give them some guidelines to follow, and just like something they can look at and see, oh yeah, okay, I could do it this way, and probably put their own spin on it and extend it themselves. So without further ado, let's switch to the code base and let me show you what I have here. So the first and most important thing is I made the main file and the main loop way shorter, way smaller. And I removed most of the require statements up here. You can see there are only a few prototype requires up here left. You're gonna see why I need those in a moment. So I kept the first thing in, which is the memory cleanup code. I just didn't saw the necessity of like removing it from here. I think this is fine code. It's okay here. If you don't do anything else with your memory, like I had the idea of saving the memory and not deleting it and using that information for spawning new creeps and stuff like that. You can do stuff like that, but if you don't, I think it's a good idea to just have that clean up here. You could probably put that in a function and just call it in one line to make it a little bit more a little shorter here, but I don't think it's too big of a deal. The whole function is not too long anymore. Okay, so next part is letting the creeps do their job. That was pretty long before because it was a big switch statement, and now it's just a very small and tiny and easy to understand loop. So we loop over all the creeps we have in the game, and we're gonna use the function run roll on that creep, and that's a function I prototyped. So that's a function you will find in prototype.creep, which I required up here, so we can access that. So every creep will have the function run roll, and I'm gonna show you what that does in a moment. You probably can figure it out by the name already if you know my old code base. So yeah, so this is really nice. It just lets all the creeps do what they're supposed to do, and that's very easy and neat. And then we do the same thing with towers. We get all the towers in the game, and then we call a function I called defend, which is again in the prototype tower file. And run that, and then we do the same for the spawns. We go over all the spawns and call spawn creeps if necessary, which is a function I wrote in the prototype spawn class. Okay, so the main loop is really nice, really short, really easy to understand now, and that's the whole goal of the refactoring. Again, as I said, we could probably put this in an extra function and make it one line, like give it a good name, like clean up memory or something along those lines. Just put it down here and call it from there. It's probably a little nicer, but I didn't do that. So yeah, let's talk about the prototype creep first. So you might have noticed all those require statements which were in the main class before are not there anymore. They now are in the creep prototype, and they are structured a little different. Instead of having multiple variables for each of the requires, I have one big object now, which hosts all the require statements basically. And so now we have this roles object, and we can call the roles from there. And we do that in the run roll function, which is really short and really easy again, because all we do is we take the roles object, we take the corresponding property of that object corresponding to the role of the creep by checking this .memory.role. This is the creep in this case because we are on the creep prototype. So we take the role, use it as a key for the roles object, and we get the corresponding property back, and then we just call run on that role, which is the same as we did before. But it's way easier to understand now. It's way shorter, way better organized, and way easier to extend. If you have a new role now, all you have to do is you have to put another property in here with a new require statement, and that's it. And obviously implement the role. But if you remember in previous episodes, one of my most common mistakes was to just forget one of the parts of activating the role. Either I forgot the require, or I forgot to put it in the switch statement which activated the role, or I maybe copy pasted wrong, stuff like that. So you can remove or reduce the chance of the possibility of those mistakes or mistakes like that a lot by refactoring your code. So this is one of the most important reasons to do this stuff in general, and this is a pretty good example of why this is useful. So this cannot happen anymore. I just have to remember to put the require in here, and I'm good. So it's only one thing I have to remember and not multiple things. So that's good. And well, we're going to talk about get energy later. Let's not talk about that right now. Let's talk about the tower really quick, because that's really, really easy. That's just the same code as before. It's just in a prototype now. I just wanted to move it out because you could come up with more complicated behaviors, so it makes sense to not have that in the main loop and have a prototype for the tower itself. It's just, as said, the same as before. We find the closest enemy creep and we shoot it. That's it. Okay, so the most complicated code is in the spawn prototype, as you could expect, because the spawning code was pretty complex in the old code base as well. It's still pretty complex, but it's a little easier to understand. It's still not great. I still think you can probably make this way easier, but I didn't want to completely rewrite everything, so I just improved it in a lot of in certain spots and made it a little nicer. It's still not super great though. Anyway, you might have noticed I added a bunch of those comments in my code base at various places that it activates the IntelliSense for those variables. It doesn't work everywhere for some reasons. Like for some, it just didn't work. I'm not sure. I think there are some bugs in IntelliSense, or maybe I'm using it wrong. I don't know. But it's still useful. Like having this, I showed this in the last episode. I think gives me auto completion on rooms. So now I have the room functions here because IntelliSense or Visual Studio knows that this variable is a room object now. So it shows me the functions of a room, which is very useful. And you can do stuff like that. This is an array of creeps now. So if you take a look at that variable now, and auto-completed, it actually gives you the functions for an array, which is cool. However, if you take an object of that array, it will not actually realize that that's a creep for some reason. So that's a little weird, but yeah, it's not perfect. That's why I prefer strongly typed languages like C# or Java. But well, that's a different topic. So let's talk about this. So first of all, you see my variable up here, list of roles, which is just a list of all the roles I have. And having magic strings here is not great, but it's the easiest solution I came up with without making it super complicated. And I think it should be okay enough. So yeah, I have a bunch of roles here, and I will use that this array to iterate over the different roles and check the spawning logic and stuff like that. So this is the same as before. We get the room, we get the number of the array with the creeps in the room, and then we change it. So then I had this huge code block where there's multiple variables, number of harvesters, number of upgraders, number of repairers and stuff like that, and I changed that to this code, which is way nicer. So now we have an object, number of creeps, and it will host properties for all the roles. So we iterate over all the roles, and for every role we put another property into this object, number of creeps role, and we save the number of those creeps or creeps with that role in that property. So now number of creeps is an object with a bunch of properties, one property per role, and the value of the property will be the number of creeps with that role in this certain room. So this is this replaces the number of harvesters, number of creeps, number of upgraders, and so on variables with just one nice object, which is easier to understand, easier to handle. So that's good. This is still the same. I renamed this variable. It was called energy before, which was not very intuitive because it's actually max energy or energy capacity. I could have called it that as well. Because yeah, I don't get, like, if you think about energy, like a variable called energy, you probably assume it's the amount of energy available or something along those lines, which is not actually what this is. This is the maximum amount of energy available if all your extensions are full. So yeah, I just renamed it to make it easier to understand. And now I adjusted all the code. Instead of having here number of harvesters, I have number of creeps, harvesters, a harvester here. And instead of number of lorries, I have number of creeps, lorry, and stuff like that. It's a little longer, sure, but you could rename this and make the name of this object shorter if you want to. But I think it's better to have long names which are easy to read or easy to understand, and are like the name should explain what this variable is about. So in my opinion, that makes it way easier to understand your own code. So that's always good. So yeah, it's a little longer, but it's way easier to use now and more generalized. Like it's just more structured. Or structured is the wrong word, but it's more streamlined. It's more streamlined, and that's a good thing because it tends to create less bugs and makes it easier to extend your code. So this is logically this is the same code. It just uses the variables a little different. We check for harvesters and lorries and create miners. We create lorries or harvesters. This is the backup code. If all our energy creeps are done or dead. So this is almost exactly the same as before. I think it's exactly the same. I didn't change anything here probably. Not really. Like, sure, little things. Like, instead of having spawn dot something, I've replaced everything with this because there's a prototype function now, so this is not called in the main loop anymore. So I obviously changed a few variables and stuff to make it work here, because now this is always the spawn this is called on. So well, I replaced game.spawns. I don't know. I'm not sure how I did before, but anyway, this is the new way of doing it. But besides that, I didn't change much here. That's probably the only thing I changed. Anyway, so so far it's pretty similar to what I did before, except for the number of creeps counting part up here. So this is very, very similar, and now it gets a little different. Well, instead of having this long if-else statement, like this extremely long if-else statement over all the roles and checking if the number of creeps is smaller than the minimum number of creeps for that role and stuff like that, I just streamlined it to a little shorter version. So it's still not super streamlined because some roles need special logic. One of them is the claimer, and one of them is the lorry, so it's still not super customized, but all the other roles are in this line. So let's talk about this really quick. So if nothing of the, like if we didn't need a backup creep, so all of this didn't create any creeps, we get in here and we iterate over all the roles, and then we check, and then we have some special cases. This first special case, if the role is claimer and the claim room property is set in memory, that means we have to create a claimer. In that case, we call create claimer, obviously, and remove or clean up the memory afterwards. If the role is not claimer, we're gonna check if we have the minimum number of creeps for that role. And you might have noticed I changed this a little bit around a lot as well. Before I had it organized like spawn.memory.min harvesters, for example, or min upgraders. So I had one variable for each role. Again, I made it one object and use properties for it. I'm going to show you that really quick, actually. Let's go to memory. And yeah, let's take spawn2. Why not? Spawn2 is undefined. What? No, spawn2 doesn't make sense. That's a spawn I don't use anymore. There we go. So spawn1 now has two objects. One is called min creeps and one is min long distance. Oh, that's actually a typo. Distance. There we go. That's better. They probably all died. Yeah, I don't have any long distance harvesters anymore. That's unfortunate. Wait, what? Wrong room. I checked the wrong room. Anyway, still don't think, I probably don't have any more. No, all my long distance harvesters are gone because of this typo. Anyway, now it's fixed. Okay, cool. So I have one object min creeps and one object called min long distance harvesters. Without the S. Long distance harvester, I probably should. Let's check how it's called here. Yeah, there should be an S. So another bug fixed. Not a bug in the code, but in my memory setup. So yeah, Good thing I looked at it again. So let's take a look. So this is an object now, and as I said, I have one property for every role: Lorry, upgrader, repairer, builder, wall repairer, and then the number of creeps I want to have in that role. I probably fucked up something else again. Number of long distance harvesters is not defined. Where is that? Spawn creeps if necessary. Line 92. That should be here. Number of long distance harvester. Yeah, okay. See the error. I think I want the S there though, so let's change this. There we go. Good. Yay, it spawned one. Good. Good. Okay, working now. So anyway, back to the memory. So as you can see, I have an object with properties and the numbers now, instead of having one variable for each. And I have similar object for the long distance harvesters. And yeah, that's nicer. Didn't I change this to S? Wait. Let's refresh that really quick. That's one of the annoying things. Oh, there we go. That's one of the annoying things in the memory thing here. If you change the memory via this interface instead of, like, you can type it in the console. That's pretty straightforward. But you if you want to click it instead and you use this interface, there's one thing you have to keep in mind. If you change something here and then you press the save button and then you instantly open it up again before the next tick, it will show you old value again. So if you change something and you open it up again and you think, it didn't save my change, wait a few seconds and press the refresh button and check if it actually changed, because it will not the refresh will show you the old value before you changed it until the next tick, which is a little unintuitive, I have to say, but that's how it is. So that just as a heads up. Anyway, so I have an object here now, so I use it similar to the other variable. I check number of creeps, which is my local object in here, is smaller than this.memory.min creeps, which is the object in the memory of the spawn. And if that's the case, I spawn one, and the lorry has an extra function. All the other ones work with create custom creeps, so I checked for lorry here again. And that's really it. That's the spawn function for the most part. Then yeah, long distance harvesters afterwards. But besides that, that's it. So long distance harvesters are similar to this part. I just count them globally as before, because they're not necessarily in the same room as the spawn, so that wouldn't work. And I think this was the case where the auto-completion just didn't work. Is that correct? No, actually this one worked. I'm not sure. There was one part where it didn't work. I'm not sure why. Anyway, so yeah, long distance harvest is very similar. We just go through all the rooms in the long distance harvesters object. So basically through everything, through every property of this object, which is the room names, and we check if there are enough long distance harvesters for that room, and if there are not, then I will create one, and that's it. And then in the end, I refactored the output a little bit again. You remember I have this output which shows me the current number of creeps in that room for every roll, every time I spawn a new creep, and I just made that a little nicer as well, as you can see here. There's one downside here and a little logic change actually I made. The long distance harvester is not as flexible anymore as it was before. I just have, I have one line for spawning them now, so I will always spawn them with 2 work parts and with source ID 0, not ID, source index 0, which is not very flexible, and you should probably change that if you want to set up multiple long distance harvesters for multiple rooms and stuff like that. But since I only long distance harvest from one room right now, I couldn't be bothered to change it right now. So yeah, this is not very optimal yet. This is not very flexible. This is not a good solution. But yeah, for now I will not change it. I will change it when I need it, which might never happen. We'll see. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, keep that in mind. This is not great. If you have multiple long distance harvesters for multiple rooms, you probably want to change this a bit. An idea would be to save those numbers in the object as well, like in memory as well, and try to access it from there. So that would be one way of doing it, for example. There are probably other ways as well. Or you just keep the old logic, which works as well. Okay, so this is spawning. And I didn't change anything for the create creep function, so they're all still the same as before. So nothing new here. And I think the other big change I made is to the creeps, mainly. Yeah, yeah, that's the last thing. I created this get energy function in the creep prototype. So every creep now is the function get energy now, which takes 2 properties. And basically what is this is supposed to do? Most of the roles had one part in code where they were looking for energy, either from a source or from a container or storage. And this code looked very, very similar for all the roles. So I decided to put it in one function and put it in the prototype so I can just access it from here. So if you take a look at the builder, for example, this part was very, 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 very longer before, and it was an almost duplicate to the same part in a lot of other roles. So now it's just creep get energy, and it's the same for the harvester, or not exactly the same because I use other parameters, but it's only one line for a parameter for the harvester, and the repairer just has get energy as well, and the upgrader, and so on and so forth. And this function has 2 properties: use container and use source. And those basically indicate if this creep should get from where this creep should try to get energy. So it will first check if use container is true, and if that's the case, it will try to find a container or storage with energy in it and try to get there and get the energy from that. And if it doesn't find one, it will check if use source is actually true, or if it doesn't find one, or if use container is false, obviously. Then it will go into the second statement and check if use source is true. And in that case, look for the closest active source and try to harvest it. And that's it. So this is just like, this is a good example of how you reduce or remove redundancy. There's one very, very basic but important design concept when you're talking about programming, which is called dry. Don't repeat yourself. This is actually very, very, like, there are a lot of design concepts and a lot of ideas and a lot of patterns and stuff, but the most basic one, and basically the most important, or one of the most important ones, so it's really easy to remember, is this one: dry. Don't repeat yourself. Try to not duplicate your code. Don't create redundancy if possible, or if easily possible. Like it's always like in your refactor code, you often end up in a situation, okay, this is not super nice. I could change this around, refactor it, and completely restructure it to make it nicer for some reason, but that it would also require a lot of work and make the code way, way bigger and blown up. That happens a lot. And in those situations, we have to think about, is it worth it? And I would say in Screeps, most of the time it's probably worth it, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Screeps is all about evolving and changing your code. So the nicer and better organized your code is, the easier that will be. So in Screeps, it's really, really important. But if you have other projects, sometimes it's just not worth it to make the code cleaner if it requires you to like write a lot of wrapper classes or something else really complicated. So yeah, but if you want to remember one important design concept, it's dry. Don't repeat yourself, because redundancy causes a lot of issues, a lot of copy-paste errors, a lot of things you forget, like you change it in one place and don't change it in another, stuff like that. It's not good. Don't do it. So if you remember anything from this video, remember dry. Okay, good. I think that's it. Is that it? I think it is. Did I change anything else of importance? No, I don't think so. I added a bunch of comments for parameters and variables and stuff like that to make the autocomplete work a little better. It still doesn't work great. For example, I don't get the autocomplete for the get energy for some reason. Like if I go to builder and say creep here, I just don't get energy. It's not here. I'm not sure how. Probably because it's in a different file and the builder doesn't know the prototype. I don't know how to change that. I don't know. JavaScript and IntelliSense are a little weird when it comes. Visual Studio and IntelliSense are a little weird when it comes to JavaScript autocompletion. So yeah, that's as I mentioned earlier. That's why I prefer strong typed languages. You can do this stuff like autocompletion and stuff like that is so much easier in those languages. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of JavaScript. Well, not a big fan at all. Actually, I hate this language. But that's like. That's just personal preference. So anyway, yeah, that's it, I think. So let's wrap this up. There are 2 more things I want to talk about. First, I mentioned this last episode. This is potentially the last Screeps episode. Not necessarily, but potentially. And I think, okay, first of all, I think it's an okay end to this series because, like, I showed a lot of concept, I showed a lot of ideas on how to write Screeps code, and now I have an episode on how you organize code in general as well. So I think I covered a lot of important topics for someone who's knows the basics of programming but is not very experienced and want to dive into this game. So I think overall I'm happy with the content I provided in general. Sure, there are a lot of more topics I could talk about, but I think it's a good base set of things I demonstrated. So I'm okay with the series ending here. That doesn't mean it will though. But the reason why it might is that I will go on vacation now. I will not create another Screeps video this year. So this means I will take a break from Screeps until 2017. And I know myself, when I take a break of a game, there is a real chance that I will not come back to it. That's just how I work. Like, I always look for new games. I want to see new game mechanics and experience new stuff. That's why I like gaming. I want to play a lot of different games, and I have a hard time coming back to games when I stop playing them for one or another reason. So there is a chance I'm not coming back. Maybe I will. We'll see. But I don't want to promise anything. So if you are here for Screeps mainly, then be prepared for that. There might not be any more Screeps. The other thing is, in general, this is probably the last video I make this year. It's very unlikely I make another one this year, so this is probably the last video for this year, and I just want to sum up this year a little bit, basically, or not sum it up, but I have a few thoughts about it. So first of all, I want to thank you a lot for watching this year, or in general, but like now I want to thank you for this year because it's the end of this year. It makes sense, right? So it means a lot for me. I say this a lot, but this is because it actually is true. It means a lot for me when people spend their spare time watching my content. Reason is that for me, spare time is very, very valuable. I don't have as much spare time as I would like to have, and it's my most valuable resource. So if others spend their spare time watching my content, that means a lot to me, and that's really, really appreciated if you do so. So thanks for that. And at the same time, I want to criticize myself a little bit for the content I produced this year, or especially the last half of this year, or last third or so. For the people who just recently subscribed, who are not familiar with my usual content. So usually I have two series. One which is more like my easy way of getting some content out if I don't have a lot of time, which is my blind first impression series called Pine's Primal Perception, where I just blindly do a let's play for 20 to 40 minutes or something along those lines of a new game, and record that and put that on YouTube with some light criticism I came up on, and mainly with the focus on just showing the game. But as I said, it's blind first impression, so I don't plan anything because I can't. So those are like my lightweight content, I would say, and those are not the content I want to do mainly. I want to do the other series I do is What Is, where I talk about the game more in depth after having played it for several hours and showing the game. The main focus of that series is to present a game I find interesting for one or another reason, and give some insight on the game mechanics and a little bit of criticism here and there to the game as well, and making recommendation on who would enjoy this game and who wouldn't, so you can make a purchase decision, or just find out about a new interesting game maybe. And the thing about this series is I didn't make a lot of videos, a lot of What Is videos in the last few months, like very, very few, and I really hate that. There were a lot of games where I wanted to make one and I didn't for one or another reason, and I don't want to come up with excuses here. It just didn't work out, and I'm sorry for that, and I hope I can change that next year, because that's the main series I want to do, like showing you different games, and not just as a blind first impression format, just like and instead with a more in-depth video presenting the game and highlighting and explaining the things I think are important about a game. And because that's my main intent with this YouTube channel, actually, and that's what I want to do. And yeah, I'm very unsatisfied with how it went this year with this series, and I want to change that next year, and I'm pretty optimistic I can do that as well. A few things in my life will change next year, and that will mean I will have a little easier time of doing that. Also, one of the reasons I did a few less was that I made a lot of Screeps videos recently. But it's not really true. Like, maybe I would have made one more what is videos if I would not have made any Screeps video. Maybe 2, but even that, I don't know. Probably not, actually. Because, yeah. Anyway, I didn't, and that just happened. And I'm sorry for that. I'm very unsatisfied with myself when it comes to that, but I'm gonna try harder next year. And I have good reasons to think that I will be more successful at that. So let's end this ramble here with another thanks a lot for watching. I really mean it. Have a good end of the year, and hopefully see you 2017. I'm TH Pine. This is Screeps, maybe my last Screeps video ever. Maybe not. Who knows? See you next time.